So good morning, everyone. Welcome to another New Way Growth and ConeX Portal Supplier and panel discussion. As always, Sam will do a quick introduction, and we're focusing on engineering and manufacturing this morning. So, Sam, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. Obviously, this is our last live of the year. So thank you to everyone who's listened and joined our previous ones throughout the year. It has been a very good year of these live sessions. We host them essentially to showcase some of the awesome things that are going on in the manufacturing, design, engineering world. And they're all free to watch back on YouTube. I'll put the link in the comments later on during the session. Today, our focus is on the world of design and some ideas and improving design. And we've got a great panel, as you'll see as we go through the session, of some very, very experienced designers with some very interesting projects that they've been working on. So shortly I'll hand over to Ben and Rich from Mouse Design, and they can introduce themselves and get into the session. And as always, any of you watching live, please feel free to comment on the feed. Let us know who you are, if you've got any questions, and we'll make sure the guys get asked those questions. Obviously, we can see the comments as they come in live, so we'll make sure that we ask the panel and everyone there as well. Instead of going around the room and doing introductions, what I'll do is ask the panel to introduce themselves as they come up and ask questions, and I'll also ask them to post in the comments feed who they are and how best to connect with them as well as we go on. So yeah, as I say, feel free to drop any questions, and what I'll do, I'll hand over to Ben, who's going to introduce himself, company, and make a start on the presentation that we've got today. So over to you, Ben.
Thanks. So hi, my name's Ben White. I'm the CEO of Mouse. We are a full service product design agency, not only offering help with every stage of the design process, but with design in the greater sense. Mouse was founded by Rich Taylor and myself 2 years ago, off the back of 10 years of consultancy and agency work. We have a wealth of experience in everything design and problem solving, from putting whitewater in the desert of Dubai to creating sustainable PPE in the middle of a pandemic. Today, we're here to talk about designing better solutions. So this isn't just for designers. This is for everybody in almost any situation. But before we get into that, just a little bit of housekeeping. As we discuss this today, feel free to reach out, ask questions in the chat box, or if you're playing catch up on LinkedIn, then feel free to drop us an email at talk@mousedesign. So I'll just put this up actually on the slide. I've got all the email addresses there. If you can share that, Adam, that would be great. We're also dropping an ebook later today for you to download, so you don't need to keep any notes today. You can join in the conversation instead of making notes. The link can be found below, or design better solutions at mouse.design, and we'll send you a copy of the ebook. So yeah, that's great. So how do you design better solutions? So a little bit of background on where we're coming from today. Last year, I completed my MA in design management. I enrolled on the course after spending the best part of 3 decades working as a product designer across a multitude of industries. And I entered into the course to try and discover the relevance of academia and its place in the real world. As with every project, I threw myself into the learning. Yet when it came to my thesis, I just wanted to bring this back to real world applications. And when I did my thesis, this is essentially what I did. So I spent 6 months researching the rather snappy title, How Can SMEs Use Startup Influenced Design-Led Innovation to Gain Competitive Advantage? I'm not going to bore you with that today, but if you go into Northumbria University archives, you can find my thesis and have a thrilling read. So essentially, the conclusions made from this research of interviews of professionals, case studies, literature reviews allowed me to develop a simple 5 guide point model for designing better solutions. They can be applied to any problem every day in any situation. These 5 guides are all borrowed from a designer's toolbox. So as most of this panel are designers, they'll relate to some of these tools, and I'm just here to share some of these tools with you today. Don't worry, they don't involve drawing, colouring in, complex maths or equations or any of that. They really are simple. The only thing required is an open mind and a drive to make things better. So we can probably switch off the slides at the minute, actually, Adam, and I'll go back to them when we get to the 5 points. So why are designers toolkit? Why are designers so good at coming up with solutions and solving problems? We're very accustomed to the word design. We hear it every day. Every Apple product launch, they love to tell you about the latest and greatest features. Every car company at the moment is shouting about how the latest designs improves and increases the range of their electric vehicles. And social media is full of Airbnb flaunting their designer and Instagrammable holiday retreats. It's something that we've become accustomed to in everyday life. However, we need to move away from the idea that design is purely a function to create something. Design can be used as a very effective creative tool to solve problems. When everyone was fighting the war to miniaturize mobile phones, Apple revolutionized the mobile phone market with the simple idea of putting the internet in your hand, taking Apple from a failing tech company to a $2.25 trillion company. Elon Musk asked the question, why do electric vehicles suck? And then developed a class-leading battery delivering EV range, which is still unmatched within the industry, and catapulting Elon Musk, the richest person in the world. Airbnb massively disrupted the holiday sector and fundamentally changed the way in which we go on holiday. So much so, it now has over a 20% share of the holiday rental market in the US and is currently worth an approximate $60 billion. So these examples are extreme, but I wanted to use examples that everybody would be familiar with. And as impressive as these examples are, let's not get caught up in the final product. Let's focus on how these companies achieve these outcomes. The creation of product, real or virtual, is essentially a byproduct of a proven thought process, and this is called design thinking. You may or may not have heard of design thinking before, but it is essentially a theory based upon the way in which designers think and work. So why designers, and why should we pay attention to this way that they work? Well, you know, most people think of designers as the weird ones with check shirts, crazy hair, too many monitors on their desk, drinking too much coffee, and they look like they've turned up to work on a skateboard. Well, that might be true, but designers are thinkers and tinkerers. When confronted with a problem, they'll run through a multitude of solutions simultaneously, asking all the what-if questions, testing ideas, and yeah, designers will probably sketch out a little bit, but this is just a way of getting lots of ideas down very quickly. So this skill is not limited to designers or creatives. Everyone has the ability to use design thinking. And if you're thinking that you're not creative, think again. Everybody has this creative skill, and children are an amazing example of this. Uninfluenced and unbiased by the world around them, they constantly search for alternative solutions. And children learn through play. So staying with this idea of play, Lego is an amazing example of design thinking. How many things can you build from a small number of blocks? And if you give my kids a small number of blocks, they will build dinosaurs, they'll build houses, they'll build cars, anything that they can think of, they will go and try and build. The issue is, as we get older, most of us stop playing and we get on doing grown-up things, boring things, paying the mortgage, working, going to the office, paying bills. And this is because we've learned from our experiences, good or bad, but we become accustomed to the way things work. We become blinkered in our approach. And the model that I'm going to show you today will help you unlock your creativity, even if you don't think you're creative. Guido Stumpf uses a great example about this in his TED Talks. And if you've not watched them, they're well worth a quick Google and a quick watch. he uses an amazing, simple coffee filter. So the round bit of paper that you put in the bottom of a coffee machine, he gives every single participant of his talks a coffee filter. And partway through, what he'll do is divide up the audience into groups and then ask them to think of an alternative use for a coffee filter, and then just leave them to it. And this is a prime example of how people can collaborate and think of different uses. So before we get into this model, I just want to talk about what happens in this process and how this model works. And this is the process of divergent and convergent thinking. So let me just, if we can go back to the slide, I'll just bring this up. So divergent, convergent thinking, it's a pretty simple method of thinking. Essentially, this process is expanding your thinking, followed by a reasoning to determine an outcome. So IDEO are a world-famous design consultancy, and they started floating the idea of showing how innovation occurs. And this is just an expansion of ideas before a rationalization where you converge the thinking into a solution. Later on, the Design Council have adapted this again and created the double diamond. If you look on their website, they will proudly talk about this a lot. And this is a mapping of the design development process. So where we are with this is, this leads us to what I've called the solution compass. And much like a compass, 4 points and an area in which we operate. There's no step-by-step way to go through into this process. It's more of a guide to aid your thinking to develop better outcomes. If used properly, you'll probably end up spiraling around the 4 diamonds within the center of this model. And the idea is that you get to the model, to get to the center of the model. You'll also probably find that if you were to enter into this process and use this model for the same question, you could quite possibly come out with a different answer depending on who you speak to when you come through this. So, as I said, it's intended as a guide to find better solutions rather than a step-by-step. You're definitely going to get their solution. So it may look a little bit confusing, but I'm now going to break it down into the 5 easy steps. Does anybody just want to, just before I delve into this a bit further, does anybody want to jump in and ask anything up until this point? No, all good. I'll crack on.
Sorry, Ben, I was going to jump in. I'm Rich. I work with Ben on this design consultancy, Mouse. Yeah, I was just thinking, you sort of talking about problems. Does it always start with a problem? Ben, was that kind of the fundamental for this process to get going?
Not necessarily. So we have to define the word problem. So all good design of any product, whether that's a real product or virtual product, solves a problem. Now, you may not consider it to be a problem. It may be, oh, we need to make this better, but that's your problem. That is your problem arena. So as we get into this, you start to understand how we can phrase these questions as problems that you need to solve. Okay. So with the problem arena, thanks for that, Rich. That's the great intro into this bit. This is where we move away from the idea of design being the function to create something, but rather a creative tool to solve these questions or problems. The problem arena can be applied to any problem. So why are my customers not engaging with my social media? How do we increase market share? Is a 4-day week a viable option? Why are products arriving broken with my customers? What's the next thing? Big thing? Where am I going? What am I going to have for dinner this evening? It doesn't have to be work related. And as you'll see, I'll use an example which is not work related at all. But you can start to see how we can build this model up quite quickly. So Probably the most difficult part of this process starts right at the beginning, and that is with trying to build a question. Excuse me. When you have found your problem, it's easy to preempt the solution. We have to try not to do this, because if you preempt the solution at the beginning, you don't allow yourself the freedom to explore properly what you could possibly do with it. So when you're framing your problem, be as open-ended as possible. Don't over-define it. Don't over-define your issues, because they might not be issues, and I'll get onto this in a second. So let me get into this with an example. People are renowned at failing their New Year's resolutions on how. So we'll use this scenario because everybody's familiar with it. So I'm going to pose the problem as, how do I shed those extra kilos after a little too much Christmas indulgence? It's something everybody's familiar with. So the thing to do is, don't start listing out the ways you could achieve this. Deliberately leave it as open as possible. You should broaden and simplify the scope as much as you can. So instead of focusing on the weight-based resolutions and how to do it, you can simplify the questions, and it's just, how do I improve my health? So it's a massively open-ended question, which leaves you a lot of scope for exploration. So that's step one. Simplify your question. Simplify your problem. Okay, so then we get into the so this is where you now start to really start thinking about how you solve your problem. So we'll start with the first diamond. So remember, these diamonds are the divergent, convergent thinking. So this is where the research starts, and there is no order to do this. I'm just starting at the top and moving around the circle. So research, you really need to expand your knowledge on your problem. So intimately get to know every aspect of the idea or problem. And a great starting point with this is, I can never pronounce it, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, the who, what, where, when, why, how of the problem. So this is the 6 W's. Don't ask me how is a W, but it is. So if we apply this to our problem, who? Well, the straightforward answer is, the question is, how do I improve my health? So the straightforward answer could be, well, the who is me, obviously. But again, this is quite narrow thinking. So you can get into this and you're thinking, well, if I can do it, then maybe I can get some other family members to do it, or I can get friends to do it, or I could build a model which would benefit society as a whole, or I could come up with a great idea that I can monetize and I can make a living from. So when you're doing your research, you are expanding your thinking about the problem. What can you do to improve your health? There's a lot of answers to this, and it'd be impossible to explore them all. So a broad brush approach at the early stage is all that's required. So how do I improve my health? Well, I can eat healthier, I can give up alcohol, I can become a vegan, I can just do more exercise. There's so much there, but you need to understand what is available to you at the beginning. And until you move around to some of the other diamonds, you may need to come back and do more research. So at this point, there is no need to waste the time to specialize in any one point of research. Where can you start to make yourself healthier at home, work, or gym? How about in the car or sat on the train? And you can start to identify bad habits and problem situations. So, for example, I'm on the road a lot and I drink too much coffee. So you can start to build this bigger picture. When is very similar. It's just, okay, well, I'm in the office, I get hungry in mid-morning, so I just eat loads of rubbish. And all of this is start to then join together. And then the why is just, why do I need to be more healthy? It's like, well, I would be able to get off the sofa easier, or I'd, you know, enjoy life a bit better, or my joints wouldn't ache, and I'll live longer, and everything else. And then the how, and it's just like, how can I become more healthy? So you're just building this big picture with, you're just building this bigger picture around your problem. So without ever solving it, you are just increasing your knowledge around the area. There is no prescribed amount of research to undertake. The aim is to broaden your knowledge around the problem area without specializing in one key area. You can always cycle back, as is mentioned, and you can always cycle back once you've gained this knowledge and then specialize later. Great. So is everybody clear with the research side of things?
I have a bit of a question, if I can jump in. How long do you spend on the research side of things? Because for me, this is, I mean, there's an element of, I mean, iPhone is a good example. You came back to it, you know, you mentioned it really early on. They didn't release a product that they were happy with in 2008, whenever it was, when they launched the first iPhone. They just got it out there because they wanted to get something on the market, and then use that to test the market, and then developed what we see today. Yeah. So they obviously did the research, but they also had an element of, okay, that's enough, let's just get on with it now. How much is too much research, I guess, is what I'm trying to get right.
That's a very good question. And actually, the iPhone's a good example when we get round to the prototyping side of things. And Apple is a very good example on the prototyping. But coming back to the research, I guess at the early stages of this process, you do not need to spend too long doing research, because if you end up spending too long on research, you end up becoming too specialized in one direction. And as we go through the diamonds, you'll see that actually just development of an idea is never a linear path. It will always go off in different directions. And this is where the research comes in. So you could be researching a competitor, but realistically, there's something called user-focused design. And this is with your end users. And this can be your customers. This could be the people who end up using your products. If you understand them and what their needs are, then you are going to come up with a better solution. So how much is too much? It really depends on the question you're trying to solve and the complexity of what you need to go into. So if you are trying to develop a new chemical formula, then obviously your research is going to be going that direction quite heavily. But you also need to understand what it's going to be used for. Otherwise, you end up with this great idea that is pointless at the end of it. So it's just about expanding your knowledge enough to know, basically to help you guide yourself through this process.
I think what you were saying at the very start in terms of the problem, defining the problem, keeping it as open and broad as possible is so important, because you can, you know, be very closed-minded. This is going to be the solution. This is going to be how it works. This is what I'm going to do, and this is what it's going to look like in the end. Something could change on day one, which means you go in a completely different path. But I think keeping yourself open and aware and allowing that to happen is really important, especially in the kind of creative industries.
Quick question from me. Quick question from me. So where, and you may answer this later on, but I'm wondering as to product market fit and also market size. Because they will have, as you alluded to just a minute ago, will have an impact based on whether you go for this problem, whether you go for this solution or not, whether you go down and spend more time on that. Now, it also depends on whether you want to have numerous ideas, let them fail, and pick the one that goes as well. So it depends on the sort of like what approach you're taking. But where do you see that fit in the step? Right at the beginning, or is it a little bit further on down the line?
No, a little bit further in. So you can think about it right at the beginning. So again, there's no prescribed way to go through this model. It's almost like 4 pillars of guidance. So yes, I will get onto this about options later on. So options is the third pillar, if you like, that we're going to go into. Excuse me. Yeah. So as far as markets go, you need to understand what that market is. You need to understand how big it is, and you need to understand your customer. And this is the research side of it. Without that, I'm not saying you are going to fail, but all the way through this, what the whole sort of discussion today is about improving your success as you go through an idea. And this could be like with the example we're using today is New Year's resolutions, but this can be applied to anything, whether this is at home, at work, or anything. All we're trying to sort of talk about today is how do you improve that success?
Okay,
Adam, just to jump in on that, I think the market size is quite an important one. Again, in relation to Sam's point about time and how much time do you spend on it all, I think with all of this, identifying the opportunity for your problem to solve within your business is really critical to give that some weighting, isn't it, at the start? So you can apply this process to any aspect, but the outcome might not give you your return on your investment if it's just a small idea that's going to make small incremental change within your product. But actually, if you take the iPhone again, that sort of example, it's that market potential and the market size that gives it that weight. So it's context specific, and I think that's part of. You could challenge.
Yeah, I mean, Apple have got a fantastic model, is because they keep the product variation very, very small, and they've got the ecosystem that people were bought into, so they buy into Apple as a brand and where it is and that's what makes them so powerful. Whereas Google or somebody like that is completely different in their approach and their business model. So yeah, it's I think it's, as you say, I think it's, and I liked right at the very beginning, because I did a post on this last week. Creativity is not limited to the critical few that think they have it, the artists and the like. Creativity, it can be applied, and anybody can learn it and do it, and should not shy away from it. And that, in particular with strategy, creativity and that creative thinking, critical thinking, is absolutely key. And not being constrained, like you say, have alluded to as well, is this rational logic thought. You want to dispel all that and just explore different areas. So yeah, no, spot on. All right, I'll let you carry on.
Brilliant. So now we've talked about expanding. Like the next diamond is defining. So although we've expanded it, we're now going to define the solution. So earlier on, we spoke about opening up the problem area, and now it's time to define the problem that you're trying to solve, or answer the question that you have posed. So this is, and I can't stress this enough, this is really different to solving the problem. If you like, this is the specification of the problem. So building on the other diamonds, you can start to really define what it is you want to achieve. You can start to build in boundaries of the solution to the problem. But again, at this point, we're not trying to solve it. We're just that it's a part of everyday life. There are constraints to what we can physically do. So if we take this back to our problem, we can start to add in a framework. So we can add in, okay, well, I've got to go to work, so I've only got a number of hours available in a day, and things are, excuse me, a little bit tight at the moment, so I can't afford to be spending £60 on the gym every month on becoming healthy. So these are reasonable constraints on your problem, and in everyday life or problem solving or ideas, you will come across these constraints. So going back to the examples I had earlier from Tesla, Airbnb and Apple, these are examples of disruptive innovation. So rather than just iterative changes, so you look at the iPhones now, and iPhones are just small changes every time they release one. The original was genuinely a piece of disruptive innovation. And with that, their constraints were a lot wider. So they were not constrained by the fact that, oh, we've already got a phone, we just need to make it better. They genuinely had an idea that changed the market. Now, even when they did this, and with this disruptive innovation, they didn't have endless wealth, and they didn't have endless amount of time to develop it. So there's two constraints in there that you can add in straight away. And as you start to define your problem, you make the transition from this divergent thinking to the convergent thinking. So as you do this, if you imagine it as a egg timer with the sand coming in, so divergent thinking, you've got all of the sand in the world, and then at the bottom of the egg timer where the sand starts running through, you're just knocking all these ideas together until you get to the solution. So the definition is just about being clear about what you want to achieve. It's not the solution. It's just being clear about what you actually want to achieve within this process. So
I guess you can do this, you know, if you're going through the research phase and you identify 2 or 3 potential opportunities. I guess you can then define that into 2 or 3 separate products where you the final. As
we discuss this and we go around the diamonds, you'll start to see how they can interact with each other. So although I'm doing this in a set order, you can follow these in any order you want. You don't have to do the research first. You could start defining it first. You could start prototyping it first. But you will quickly find that once you do prototyping, if you haven't done the research, you'll need to go and do some research. And if you've not defined anything, there's too much scope in there, so you won't be able to come up with a solution. So yeah, they all interact with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if, John, I know you got unmuted yourself a bit there. I don't know if you had a question to jump in. Or...
No, I was just going to come on to kind of what you're talking about now, but it's more a case of during the research process, you sometimes find that the problem you're trying to solve changes quite a bit, because you find in your research that actually I need to redefine my problem, because although I started with this kind of main point, what I need to actually do is completely different to what I started with, but will still help me achieve the overall goal. So that's something that, you know, you normally find through the design process as well. But I guess, you know, that's down to defining, you know, your problems in a more critical manner. So that was just what I was going to raise. But
yeah, for sure. And yeah, this actually the next bit we're going to talk about is changing ideas through the process is absolutely fine. It's not failure. It's a normal part of the process, and I think some people get scared of this. It's just, we must do this way. We've got this idea. It must work, and it's like, well, no, actually. And I've got a great example with this where you think I'm crazy, but it's just, you know, you've got to change the way that you think about failure and change your idea to adapt to the environment around you is necessary to create a great product or create a great solution.
That's why I was just going to say is, and if I remember rightly, I think it was a book that I like this view on it. I think it was a book by Reid Hoffman. So LinkedIn and PayPal. And the view, and it might have been Reid, it might have been Peter Thiel as well in that, and again, PayPal, the contrarian view. So you have to, at the beginning page, well, whether that fits in research. Now, for me, it wouldn't matter where it fit, as long as you went through it, is there are laws that you will need to break. There's normal standard laws don't come into things. And you need to, if you want to do something differently, don't be, and we're talking about that constraint, is don't be constrained by those laws, management laws, you know, and the technology, you know, and I was talking to Sam about this last night, is, you know, the technology might not be ready for you now, but it might be in 5 years' time.
Exactly.
And so the plan and the ideas and things like that need to be kept and need to be kept moving. So, you know, I think it was Netflix, and I think I used this in analogy, and I think it was actually the book around Netflix where it started off. I think I was talking to some around it, where they, you know, blockbuster, you know, videos. Then Netflix was postal DVDs, but they always wanted to be that streaming, but the technology wasn't there. But that they actually planned for where it would be. So don't be constrained. It comes back to that. Don't be constrained. Is that contrarian view, and I always like that contrarian view from those that I read.
I've just put a quote into the comments as well, which is something that I kind of think of quite a lot. We think of failure and success as opposites, when in reality, failure is part of success.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
To be successful, you have to fail along the way, and that's something that I come back to quite a lot, based on exactly what you're saying there. It's okay to try things and not necessarily succeed at the first try.
Yeah,
you learn every time, and then you can redefine the model as you go.
Tristan in the comments has just said about using this process in a sprint timeframe. Yeah, actually, myself and Rich had this conversation, really early this morning. So forgive me if I've forgotten half the conversation. Yeah, a design sprint is, I'm going to say, if you use this within a design sprint, it would be amazingly useful. This whole model is essentially, we're dragging this from a designer's sort of toolkit, if you like, of what designers do every day. The problem with design sprints is that they work better when you already have a load of people together in a group that already use this. So yes, you're right in saying this would work great in a design sprint. However, if you were to employ a design sprint in, I think I used an accounts firm as an example this morning, you're sat there with a bunch of accountants who are probably not aware of how to do this. So what we're talking about today is kind of using this, a tool that anybody can use, not necessarily designers. You introduce this into a design team. For example, if you're working in a company and you're feeling that your design team has gone a bit stale and you're wondering what the next big thing is, introduce this sort of thinking and you will get amazing results out of it. And as an agency, and I'm sure Mark and John will agree, this is what we do every day. It's almost every job we do is a design sprint, and this is the way that we work every day.
Yeah, Tristan, I think it's about a design sprint's kind of a point in time and a task and a team of people. But this way of thinking is almost trying to embed it into your organization. So whether you're taking this process forward and implementing it, even on just small decisions that you're making as a team, you can do it quite rapidly through it. So hopefully it can build into a design sprint to get you focused on whatever sprint you're doing, whether it's a product sprint or a new machine sprint or something like that, trying to work that problem out. But this is fundamentally sort of sits alongside it to try and help support that thinking in an organization as a whole.
Great. So moving on from that, the next diamond is about options, and this is quite a broad diamond. So I've kind of given it the heading of get creative, get social. This is about exploring a breadth of solutions to gain different perspectives to diversify not only your solutions but your thinking. You can analytically appraise the solutions against the problem that you're trying to solve, and don't be afraid to go back to the other compass points either. So let me try and explain this with a really bad example of how to apply options to the design process. So going back to the New Year's resolution, we know there are limitless ways to achieve this, and we know that people are terrible at keeping New Year's resolutions. So if I turn around and I was just like, right, I'm going to choose 5 resolutions because surely that'll increase my chances of success 5-fold. So what I'm going to do is January the 1st, I'm going to give up beer. I'm going to become a vegan. I'm going to run 5K every day. I'm going to stand up for 20 minutes every hour whilst I'm at work. And I'm going to do yoga every morning. You guys now think I'm crazy. But this is my idea. This is what I'm going to do. And I am adamant that one of these is going to succeed. Now, if this happens on January 1st, I can pretty much guarantee I'd give up in the first week because it's just too much. And I'm trying to chase 5 different ideas at the same time and implement them and just do it. And this is not what I'm talking about with options. What I'm talking about with options is actually talking to people. So tell them about your idea. And what you'll probably find is when you start this discussion about an idea, they'll give you feedback. People are very opinionated. They love to give you feedback. Listen to it. You don't have to choose to follow it, but listen to it. And what you'll probably find out is you just get this different perspective on your idea. And you then can generate better ways of improving it. And then you can develop it and let it grow. And as I mentioned earlier, the creative part of this, it's not a linear path for the solution. It really is. It's a cyclic mess of junctions and dead ends. But by collaborating with people and listening to people, you can shape and form your solution to something that will work. And it will also mean that once you do get to a dead end, that you can just take a step back and go in a different direction. And this is not, it's not failure when you hit a dead end. There's no need to just scrap the entire project. It just means that it's just taking a different path. And by allowing yourself to think of not failure as bad, but failure of I've tried something and it's not quite worked, you can learn from it and then go in a different direction. And this way you will increase your chance of success. So in a professional sort of sense, creating and following simultaneous options can be a daunting challenge. And it's just something I want to briefly bring in here, is that if you're feeling that you know you're stuck in a rut and you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and you just don't know how to get out of it, a good way to get yourself out of this rut is just to bring in either a specialist or a consultant, just to give you a different viewpoint, because that different viewpoint can flip your product, virtual or real, into something else. And it's just because everybody, especially in SMEs, everybody is so focused on what they're doing, and you're probably really good at what you're doing, is that you forget to look at the bigger picture. So by bringing somebody in that is not so close to your industry, they think about it differently and they can give you ideas to go in different directions. Great. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions on options.
I have a question. I have a few questions actually. You know, this whole idea about talking to people. One, the obvious elephant in my room is the intellectual property. And so with the intellectual property, you're having to be careful with what you say, but at the same time, you know, talk to the right people, that even some of your own designers. And I know we're going to, you know, Sam's brought up this whole idea of competition. And in my mind, there really is no such thing as competition. However, you still have to participate with that illusion of competition. And in that sense of speaking to those kind of people, you have that risk of effectively someone going, oh, he happens to be in the right position, the right time. Here's this idea, and actually he's got a hell of a lot more resource behind him to be able to pull it off. So there's a huge risk there in my mind of talking to them, talking to the right kind of people or certain people. The next thing that leads on to that too is, on a philosophical point of view, how do I say it, where energy behind an idea. You are saying, okay, fine, well, the more I talk to somebody about the idea, actually in hindsight, in the overall point of view, you're dissipating the energy and dissipating the idea and the momentum behind it, because you're talking about it more and more, and the more you talk, the less you do. And this is where I don't really know where that fine line is of talking to the right people, and how much talk do you actually need to do, or do you just get on with it? You know, forget about talking to the people. You know you're doing the right thing. Just go for it. You've done your research, and be the, you know, the actual solution, rather than doubting yourself to ask the right people. You know what I mean?
I'm really glad you asked that, Mark. Let me start with the IP thing to start with. Yes. So let me start this by saying you can have the best idea in the world, and you can work on it and refine it and work on it and refine it. But how do you know it's a good idea unless you tell somebody? So this flows on to the next part. Yes, there is a fine line between who you talk to about your idea. So as a design agency, we always put NDAs in place. So that's one way of protecting your IP. The other thing is it's this collaborative part about making these ideas good. So I hate to do it, but we'll go back to the iPhone. Nobody knew the iPhone was coming out when that came out. That was within a secret department within Apple, but it wasn't one person. And this is kind of where I'm getting to, is you don't need to speak to everybody about your idea, but it does make sense to at least speak to somebody who is in your target market, so that you can just sanity check that your idea is actually a good idea. You can monetize it. So, for example, as a design agency, it's one of those things of being a designer. We're always approached by people and say, "I've got this great idea," and then it's like, "Well, yes, that's fantastic, but how are you going to make it? How are you going to monetize it? Have you actually spoken to anybody that would actually use it? And are you going to sell more than one?" So yes, there is a fine line. You don't need to speak to everybody, but you do need to just almost sanity check that your idea is at least going in the right direction.
Okay, thanks. No, yes, absolutely. Now, this brings me on to my next point based on this. Should you at least be prepared with, say, for example, you go and speak to somebody in the target market or an industry that they're in, they're currently already doing the same sort of thing. So they're kind of really a bit more of an expert of it, and they kind of go, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. But, you know, so IP covered and all the rest of that. Should you be prepared in the sense of at least have a presentation in the back pocket, and you've done your market research and so it could end up being that the guy says, well, what do you have? Is there some opportunity for collaboration or partnership or something like that? This is probably the point, to be a little bit prepared in having those specs that you can actually, you know, my research is this, you know, my retail price is that, my costs are that, boom.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's no harm in this. And this is kind of where the research and the define diamonds come in, because you have defined that idea. So you've got a rough idea on what your cost needs to be. You've got a rough idea on where the market is and how much market share you could possibly have from an idea. So all of this is where kind of the research reinforces itself, is that it doesn't need to be super specific. You just need to be aware of what is happening in the sphere of the idea that you're trying to develop, or the problem that you're trying to solve. But yes, I mean, it's always difficult. I appreciate it is always difficult communicating with people. If you've got a good idea and you think, yeah, I'm going to make millions out of this, you don't want to give it away. Much like, I mean, there are two really hard bits about being a designer. One is, oh, what happens if somebody steals my idea? And number two is, I've forgotten what number two is now. So somebody, this goes back to the options. You have to kill an idea because it just doesn't work, and you've put all of your time and effort into it, and it's just like it's not working. And I've seen it many times where designers will just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going on something that is not going to work. So it's just like, right. And certainly as a design manager, you have to have that awkward conversation with a designer. It's just like, no, enough's enough. We're gonna kill this off, and we're gonna go in a different direction. Yeah. That's
yes.
That one. Be brave and don't be afraid to cut something if it's not working.
Yes. Yeah.
And with the being social aspects in mind as well, kind of with some of the work that we do, I've actually got another older engineer that I've worked with in the past. We're under NDA together, so whenever we get, I get like an idea that I think is very good or an idea that I want to pursue, I sometimes just give him a call and just run it by him and just say, what do you think of this? And most of the time, obviously, you've got the fear of, is he going to steal the idea? But most of the time, I come at that conversation with a greater insight into different ways that I could go, that I can actually start researching into different areas, which I didn't think of before. So, it's a useful kind of avenue to go down if you have someone there that is a trustworthy person. Obviously, you have your NDAs in place, but someone that you can always go to and bounce ideas off. It's a very, very, very beneficial avenue to go down, and I found it useful with a lot of the work that we've done as well. So,
yeah, it's people feed off each other. This is one of the best things that's happened with Mouse. So, myself and Rich have been working together for years, but we were separately freelancing before we joined together with Mouse 2 years ago, and now. Ultimately, what we're doing today is infinitely better than what we were doing on our own 2 years ago. And it's this feedback that we're getting because, I'm not just sat in my office on my working away on my computer every day. And we push each other, and there's this competitive element as well. But yeah, I'm not going to focus on that too much, but people do love collaborating with each other. Rob has just asked about what happens when people say it's a bad idea. It's difficult. You do have to, as the owner of an idea or a solution, you do have to be a little more open-minded. And this is basically where this whole discussion is going today, about being open-minded. You can have an idea that you think is great and everybody else thinks it's terrible. All this means is that you really need to just take it on the chin. And if you're confident in your idea or your solution, then if people are saying it's a bad idea, you just need to go back, look at your research, look at your definition, look at the problem you're trying to solve. And this goes back to the options, and just try and find a different way of going, basically. So it's just a different route.
I think it's, just on that as well, it's speaking to the right people as well.
Yeah.
Because obviously, yeah, you can go ask family and friends, but if they're not ultimately the target market, then they're not necessarily going to understand the idea and the concept. So if there is a way to speak to people in that target market, they're going to give you the most honest feedback on it.
And I'd add on this one as well, is to have the balls and the bollocks to go with your idea. And so if you've gone back round and you are, you've through the process, you've gone through the process, and it's still sort of like heads down the route that you are going, have the balls to stick with it, because it's the prejudices that we have, based or that other people might have from a rational logic thought, are not potentially what you want for what you're looking at from this design aspect of the solution you're looking for. Because the businesses that make a difference are the ones that go against the norm, break the rules. And some people, so again, it comes back to be careful who you are talking with to make sure they are aligned with how you think your thought process is as well. But don't get me wrong, I think there's a good, you've got to have a balance with it. So you're coming at it from all angles. But if it still comes back as you go through the process, for me, if it still comes back that idea is worth going for, then have the balls to stick with it.
Yeah, I think that's that disruptive side, isn't it? If it's incremental innovation, people can often grasp that quite quickly. If it's disruptive, you sometimes have to have that more trusted confidant that you're sharing that idea with, that perhaps has a vision that you're sharing as well. And yeah, to be able to implement that does take guts to go for it. And sometimes you've just got to be steadfast. But I think you're absolutely right, Adam, with if the process is saying it's right still, it's not necessarily the wrong thing to pursue it, even if you've got negative feedback.
Yeah, I mean, if you're shitting yourself and you think it might be a point that it might be an actual bloody good idea, you know, and something different. So.
The fourth diamond comes in, really, which is prototype, and this is a confirmation, if you like, that your idea is going to work. And this is a process of test, refine, test, refine. But it will also, it makes your solution or your idea more robust, and it increases its chances of success. It sounds obvious, but we come across far too many companies that don't prototype or test their solutions. And as part of this, right, it can only be highlighted by the stupidity of human beings. It has no bounds. People don't read instructions. People will use lawnmowers to cut hedges. Is a prime example. So, and with this again, we've talked about it already, but failure often has negative connotations, but we can flip that to help us innovate by critically evaluating that failure to make sure that your idea or solution becomes more robust. So even if somebody comes back and says it's a bad idea, it doesn't stop you prototyping and testing it, because they might have just misunderstood what your idea was until you actually show it to them and then get them to use it. And then they'll go, oh, yeah, this works brilliantly. Yes, so I'm a little conscious of time, so I will just wrap up with the 5 points that we've gone through today, and then as many questions as we can get through in the last bit of recording time. Be vague when asking your question at the beginning, or with defining your idea at the beginning. Research the 6 W's. Who, what, where, when, and why, how. Definition, so start to put a framework on your solution. Keep your options open, be social. Prototype, which is test, refine, test, refine. Excuse me 1 second. Oh, that's better. Winter cold. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free.
I think that last comment that you've made there about testing and refining is very important, and not being afraid to kind of almost go back to the initial problem and match it up and go through the process multiple times to keep working and refining and developing. And, you know, again, going back to the iPhone example, but look how many times they've tested and refined that to
yeah, I mean, you mentioned it right at the beginning with the iPhone, is they launched the first iPhone far too early because they needed to. So the first iPhone was really glitchy, but people loved it.
It was a test. That was their testing process. They put it out there, knowing it was the first one to ever reach the market, as a full-on test to see how people would respond to it. And obviously the response was brilliant. So then they refined it and went from there.
Yeah. No,
I'd completely agree. If anyone's got any questions in the chat, then feel free to drop them in the comments. If any of you guys have got any final questions to Ben or Rich, shaking.
Good discussion.
Yeah,
good discussion.
I think we'll bring that one to an end at the moment. That has been a really good discussion. Thank you all very much for joining. Thank you everyone for watching live. What I'll do, I'll ask everyone on the panel here just to comment on the LinkedIn post, their contact details, email addresses, all that sort of stuff, website links, and how we can best get in touch with you all. And I know Ben and Rich, you said that the slides, everything will be available to share. And
yeah, we'll put it in the comments.
So, I'll make sure that gets distributed after the session. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Thank you, Rich and Ben, for hosting that. Thanks for Mark, John, and Adam for being on the panel with us. If you want to find out anything else about these sessions that we do, anything else about what myself and Adam are doing with New Way Growth and ConeX, then please get in touch. And I guess I'll end by saying Happy Christmas and New Year, I guess. And yeah, so thank you all very much. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks,
Yeah,
gents.
good one.
Thanks all.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.